What happens to us after we die? Do we cease to exist, or do we live on? This may be the biggest question that mankind has ever asked, as well as what this podcast is about. In this show, we will examine past life memories, speak with professional hypnotherapists, astral projection practitioners, psychics, and much more, all in an attempt to decipher this riddle. So welcome to the puzzle. Welcome to the regression session. Welcome back to the regression session. My name is Ian. This week we're going to be hearing from Dr. Bruce Kaloski, and Dr. Kaloski is the founder of the nation's largest network of hypnotherapy clinics. He's seen over 60,000 patients over his career, is the past president of the American Board of Hypnotherapy, and is recognized as a fellow of the National Board of Hypnotic Anesthesiology. To top it all off, he is the author of 17 books, including the Amazon bestseller, Your Journey Was Never Meant to End, a compelling case for reincarnation. I'm excited for you guys to hear what we talk about. If you want to come on to the podcast to share your experiences with past lives or any metaphysical topic, shoot me an email. My email is theregressionsession@gmail.com. Head on over to my Facebook or my Twitter for some additional content, as well as show updates. It's the Regression Session Podcast on Facebook and at Regression Session on Twitter, and there's links to those in the description. There's also links to Dr. Kaloski's book, Your Journey Was Never Meant to End. So check that out as well. And here is my interview with Dr. Kaloski. Hey, Bruce, thanks for coming on to the show.
Oh, my pleasure, Ian. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I've been actually really excited to have you come on, to be honest with you. And if you don't mind, just before we keep on talking, because we were talking before, obviously, just introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your background from your perspective, your qualifications, because you got a pretty impressive bio.
Yeah, I am. Well, thank you very much. I am by trade a clinical hypnotherapist and a past life regression therapist. And I've been doing both for about the same amount of time professionally. It'll be 44 years in January, as a matter of fact, that I've been doing this. I've got a couple of doctorate degrees. One is in counseling psychology. The other one is in clinical hypnotherapy. For the longest time, I worked in behavior modification, and I still do in clinical hypnotherapy. I was privileged to create and head the nation's largest network of private hypnotherapy clinics here in Southern California, LA, Orange County. We had, it was 18 clinics, 21 staff therapists at one time. And we principally worked with weight loss and smoking cessation. That's the two most popular. And I always had a passion for past life regression. I got into that years ago, and for me, it's the most fun thing to do. You get a great connection with your clients when you do this. I got interested in both about the same time. I come from an aviation family, and I'm from Long Island, New York, and my father was a fighter pilot during the war. In the Second World War. He was stationed in England. He flew P-51 Mustangs. And he taught himself hypnosis. And I found some of his books lying around. I was interested in it. I used to watch him. He used to use hypnosis to help his students. He was a flight instructor after the war when he got out, to help his students, because we owned an airport on Long Island too. And he used to use hypnosis to help his students pass the FAA exams, both the written and the practical, the flight exam. And I used to watch him do it. I got interested in it. And one time I was rummaging through his books and I found a book called The Search for Bridie Murphy. And that was written by an amateur hypnotist by the name of Maury Bernstein back in probably at the mid 50s, I believe. And he hypnotized a lady who told a story about being having a past life in Ireland as a woman named Bridie Murphy. And she had some incredible detail. And I asked my father about it. And he told me, he talked to me about the theory of reincarnation. And he felt that he was he thought he lived one life as a fighter pilot in the First World War who was shot down over France. And then he came back as a fighter pilot in the Second World War. Well, coincidentally, he went down in the English Channel in the Second World War, luckily escaped with his life, bailed out as the plane was coming down. So that's how I kind of got interested in past life regression. Back then, there were no schools. You learned at the School of Hard Knocks. You taught yourself. And I taught myself. I read books. And the first person, my first victim was my cousin, who was sitting around having coffee one night. And I said, you want to give it? It was talking about reincarnation. And she knew what I was interested in. I said, you want to give it a shot? She said, sure, I'm game. And I just, I guess, what do they say? The Lord protects fools. So I didn't know what I was doing, but everything came out all right. And I got my formal training, my formal education. So, as I said, I've done training classes for past life regression, and I wrote a book that luckily got bestseller status on Amazon. It's called Your Journey Was Never Meant to End, A Compelling Case for Reincarnation. And I did it from the perspective of presenting both sides, pros and cons of it, and looking for objective evidence for reincarnation. And there is some out there. There's some that might be called term scientific evidence of it, and that's more or less how I based my book on. And it was I stayed away a lot from the metaphysics. I wrote more about practicality in that particular book. And I have a Facebook group of the same name, Your Journey Was Never Meant to End. And I work a lot with past life regression, reincarnation. There's different types of past life regression sessions, and they're not all the same. Not all created equal, and it's fun to work with.
Yeah, and I've actually heard of that book, and there's another podcast out there that does a really good job of presenting this whole thing of the search of Bridie Murphy. They break it down and they show like, okay, here's the things that were verified. Here's the things that weren't verified but were stated, and it is really interesting. So for anybody listening, check that book out. Also, check out Dr. Kaloski's book, Your Journey Was Never Meant to End. A link to both of those will be in the description. And now it's just so fascinating, the whole entire question of hypnotherapy and past life regression, and looking at it from an evidence point of view, right? So because the way that it's like, you can't really have too much hard evidence, you know what I mean? A lot of it is, what's the word I'm searching for? That's just completely out of my head. That's exactly what a lot of it is anecdotal. Yeah, so I actually have an experience where I hypnotized my friend, and he started describing this tribe in Africa. He started describing their clothing and their culture. He described how they put clay in their hair and on their skin. He described the landscape they lived in, their huts. He described how they were a matriarchy and how they were semi-nomadic. And he said that they lived in either Namibia or Zambia, and all this stuff. And then after the fact, I was like, so what was that about? And he said, I don't know. I have no idea where that came from. So we looked it up and we Googled it, and we found the exact tribe that he was describing, and the clay in the hair, the huts he described, the landscape, they were a matriarchy, everything lined up perfectly. And that kind of blew my mind. So have you ever had anything like that?
Yes. Yeah. Plenty of times. But let me ask you something. Your friend had no knowledge or no memories of having studied this.
No, because he.
Why would I know this stuff?
Yeah, and it came from because we talked about this, and I've talked about this with a couple other people, and it's the only theory that I could come up with to explain it is maybe like psychic influence, because there's been some research that's proven that humans have psychic abilities to some degree.
Retrocognition. It's called retrocognition. That's one of the. There are many different explanations for the phenomena that are elicited under a past life regression. That one of them is retrocognition, where they somehow clairvoyantly perceive these things, because everything that ever happened is theoretically out there somewhere, like radio waves in the universe. So that's one explanation. The other one is what's called cryptomnesia, which is learning something and subsequently forgetting having learned it and where you learned it, and then reciting that, perhaps under a regression. The problem is that in many instances, just like your friend, it is so detailed that I think it stretches the bounds of credulity to say that, he must have learned it, because they become so very, very detailed. And, there's theories of DNA and heredity. It's in our DNA. Again, you have to be, if you can show that may hold water, if you can show that person is descended genetically from the entity or person the past life they claim to be. But in most cases, you can't. And then, of course, there's the classic, right? We do. Our souls do go around. We are energy. We go back to the universe, and the grand poobah, big kahuna, or whatever, directs all of this and puts us back in for another go around. But you were asking about. I've had like you things that. Let me give you an example. Okay, one fellow. This was years ago. I was doing a class, and he was and I do a group regression with the class, and then it was in San Diego, and now the first day, and they come back for the second day training. And he comes back. He says, Bruce. He says, during that session, I saw myself as a physician. He even had a name. I came up with a name, and I was in San Francisco, and the year was 1906, and I was going on a train journey, and he happened to get out of San Francisco the day before the great earthquake of 1906 in San Francisco. His was incredibly detailed. Another person was in Wales in the United Kingdom. I guess it was he found himself in the late part of the 19th century, or was it early part of the 20th century? I forget. There's so many years ago. He had incredible detail about mining operations. He was a coal miner, and he very interesting story about. I led him through what was happening, and there was a cave-in, and we talked about that, and I had him explain this. And then he's sitting there, and he said, the canary died, which means that, remember, they had canaries in the mines, and they were the first that when the gas was being emitted from somewhere, natural gas from the earth is being emitted, and I guess canaries are susceptible to that, and when they die, then that you're in trouble. The gas is coming up. So I asked him, okay, now what's happening? What are you doing? He says, he said, we're all going to die. I know we're going to die. This is the end. So what's happening now? Describe what's happening. And he says, I'm lighting my pipe, which meant that he was committing suicide. As soon as he lit his pipe, boom. And he has some incredible details too. One fellow who really stands out in my mind. He came to me, and he didn't come to me for past life. He came to me for memory and concentration years ago, some exam. And he was sitting in the chair and squirming around. I said, is the chair not comfortable? He said, no. He said, the chair is fine. He said, I just have a back problem. I have a pain in my back, and doctors don't know where it came from. Well, that's interesting. Then he talked about being very suspicious by nature. he described he's always looking behind him, always looking behind, and it bordered on paranoia. And I broached, I felt he would be amenable to past life regression, agreeable to that. And I took him back to a lifetime. He ended up in a lifetime in the 1800s in Colorado as a fur trapper. And he was encroaching on Indian land. So they had a powwow, him and the Indians had a powwow on the reservation at the camp, and they reached an agreement. They do whatever they do, smoke the peace pipe, I don't know, and then they reached an agreement that he would be allowed to use the Indians' land to hunt. And but there was a young whippersnapper renegade Indian who didn't like the white man, didn't like the fact that the elders of the tribe were making a treaty with the white man. And as this fellow, the trapper, was walking to his horse, this young Indian renegade walked up behind him and tomahawked him in the back. He died a horrible death, lingering, long death. And but as soon as we lived there, we experienced that, his pain went away. And also that is why he was suspicious by nature. As he said, always looking behind me, always looking behind my back. Of course he would be. He's looking behind him to see if someone's sneaking up, getting ready to put a knife in it or tomahawk him. So there, and we went back. And that was years ago. It was a little bit difficult to do research. It was possible. You had to go to libraries to do your research. Now with Google, it's amazing what you can do. So that's great.
Yeah, you can find it instantly.
Absolutely.
And it's when you have people like that, and I always say this. I've said this. I swear I've said this in almost every single episode that I've ever uploaded. But regardless of whether or not it's real, it's still a real experience. And these people that are experiencing these, I don't even call it past life regression anymore. I call it spiritual hypnosis. But the people who are receiving these sessions, they're healing in a measurable way. Their quality of life is improving. They're feeling safer. They're feeling more confident or whatever it is. And that's powerful.
That's why past life regression, or past life therapy, to be more precise, is effective for people who don't even believe in reincarnation. Because if you like to, just look upon it as your subconscious delving into the mysteries of your psyche. There is a form of psychotherapy called psychodrama, in which you will ask your client to impersonate, live out your problems by impersonating a fictitious personality. And maybe it's a type of psychodrama. But then again, when you get details that really your friend with the clay and the tribe with the clay in the hair, that's pretty detailed. And that's something that the average person wouldn't know.
That begs the question, where did that come from? You know what I mean? Where does that information come from?
Yeah. And like I said, we talked about the fact it could be cryptomnesia. They learned it, read about it, saw a movie about it, stored it in their mind, forgot where they learned it, and it came up. But then again, you have to say, yeah, but so incredibly detailed. Not just talking about something in general, but coming up with specific and incredible details. They say again, it stretches the bounds of credulity. Anything's possible. Maybe. Or clairvoyance, retrocognition. Then again.
Yeah. Well, he was Mormon too. He grew up Mormon too. And he studied, like, he went to Germany as a young man on like a mission trip. And so he was more familiar with like European history than African history. Here's another thing that happened with him too. So I don't know, are you familiar with the concept of spirit guides?
Yeah. Of course.
Have you seen them present in any of your sessions at all?
What I do, I personally have not seen them present, but I have one type of regression that I do called the between lives. Some people call it life between lives. Other people call it soul regression between lives. I did one just last night, and we took a lady back to the way I do it is I take them to the lifetime, most recent lifetime The last one just lived. I do a brief overview of that. Then I take them to the death scene. Then I take them into the between life state. And usually they are met by their spirit guide or guides, but they are met by their spirit guide in the afterlife to help them transition.
Right. Yeah, and I actually utilize, because I look at these beings as actual beings, and when I first started doing this, I didn't, and I kind of thought of them as like maybe like a representation of your own consciousness or whatever. But I kind of look at them as real beings, and I use them in a therapeutic kind of a way. One interesting thing that really happened to me is, I'm not going to get into too much detail, but I had a regression done recently where I lived the experience of a young man, and this is going to sound completely insane, and I'm sure you've heard some pretty crazy stuff like I have, but you just gotta say it as it happens, right? But he got killed by a Sasquatch is what happened, believe it or not. And then the Sasquatch was aware of me there, and then the Sasquatch like psychically, quote unquote, attacked me. So then my spirit guide wrapped me up, took me away, and then I got this name in my head, right? And I'm not going to say the name. I'm going to bleep it out for my audience because I don't feel like I'm supposed to say it. But the name was okay. And I only told my wife about it. I was like, isn't this a cool name? It's not like a common name or anything. So fast forward a little bit. I'm doing a regression for this same gentleman, the guy with the African tribe. And he goes into this cathedral. And I said, okay, was there anybody there with you? And he said, yeah, there is. And I said, okay. What do they look like? He said, they have wings. They're floating up in the corner of the cathedral. He has like fangs and a cloak that comes down past his feet. And he's just staring at me. I said, okay, ask him why he's there. He said, he doesn't know why he's here. And I said, okay, ask him his name. And he said, his name's so.
Is that another name for the devil?
No.
It isn't?
No. Well, actually, I don't know. I don't think so. I think Beelzebub is.
Yeah, Beelzebub.
But is the name that I got like impressed into my mind from my spirit guide. And I had actually, as like a little ritual that I do beforehand, I actually asked my spirit guides to show up. Mm-hmm. And then he actually told me that was my spirit guide, which was completely crazy, by the way. I was shaken up pretty bad when he said, and that was really interesting too, because where did he get that name of my spirit guide, quote unquote spirit guide, whatever you want to call it? And he said the exact name. It's not a common name. It's just crazy that he was able to come up with that information.
Yeah. That might be explainable through telepathy. Right? It does, although what I have found, telepathy does seem to exist in certain people in the hypnotic state, particularly in a past life regression, when you are looking for a fairly deep state, not too deep, but anything between a medium and a deep state of hypnosis. And for some people, telepathy does seem to be present at those times.
Yeah, and at this point in his regression, he had just barely gone into the trance too. So it wasn't super, super deep.
Yeah.
Now, my next question for you, and this is, you coming from a more scientific approach, I'm going to ask you this because it's something that I've experienced. I don't call it past life regression anymore because of these experiences I've had. Have you ever heard of like the concept of simultaneous time or quantum healing hypnosis?
Well, yeah, that's two different things. You said simultaneous time. Are you referring to parallel lives?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
So they're connected in a way. It's really complicated. And I've got this from multiple people. It's telling me the same thing. And it's just me talking about, theories, or whatever. There's no right or wrong answer here. But the simultaneous time is the concept that everything that ever has happened or that is happening or that ever will happen is all happening at the same time.
Oh, okay.
And then the quantum healing is the concept that when we're doing these regressions, we're not just viewing these past lives, we're actually present. And it's a really difficult thing to wrap your head around if you're not used to the concept. But like, we're stepping into these lives and being present on some kind of a spiritual or quantum level or something. I don't even know the word for it. But that's kind of the concept, is that you're actually there for these lifetimes, and you're with this other life. Have you ever heard of anything like that?
Yeah, I've heard of that. That's a particular theory. Simultaneous times can also be thought of. Those are really two different things. The simultaneous times does posit, and Einstein believed this. A lot of you quantum physicists believe, and I believe Stephen Hawking was one of them, that there is no time as we know it. All times exist as one, past, present, and future, all the same. That was Einstein believed that. And so some believe that you can choose to be reincarnated into the past. That time is not so. If we accept that, then we accept the fact that time is not necessarily linear, one after another. If you lived in 1600, then you lived in 1700 and 1800, and so on and so forth. So, and that's the way you reincarnated linearly, I guess it would be the term. And some believe that you can reincarnate in the past. You can drop dead today and then choose to come back in the 1920s or whatever.
Yeah, and it gets really, really confusing the more you go down the rabbit hole, because the guy, when I got him deeper into the hypnosis, and I've heard this a couple of times, he was saying that his subconscious was not just his subconscious, but it was a subconscious for like multiple people.
It's called the superconscious.
Yeah.
The Jungian concept of the superconscious, that it connects everybody.
Right. And then that's kind of where these experiences are coming from, is you're stepping into that a pool, like the pool of experiences that has happened, and you're pulling from that pool.
Exactly. You're pulling from that pool. It's like a radio receiver that has all these bandwidths, and you're connecting all the bandwidths. And now let's fine tune it and turn the knob, and now we get one station, and that station becomes that particular life.
Yeah, and like I said, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just, I just wanted to maybe get your thoughts on it a little bit, see if you've come across it.
I think you hit the nail on the head. As far as we know, there is no right or wrong answer. One of the best books I ever read that had to do anything with the past lives or the afterlife, maybe some of your listeners know it, is a book called The Afterlife of Billy Fingers, by a lady by the name of Annie Kagan. I highly recommend it. Annie Kagan claims that her ne'er-do-well brother, after he died, his name was the nickname was Billy Fingers, and he was a thief at times. He was a con artist. He did all sorts of. He was a drug addict. Okay, and he was allowed to communicate with her for several years, and she had conversations, just like we're having a conversation here. She had conversations with him, and he told her what it was like in the afterlife. And one of the things he said, and I'm paraphrasing it, was that it's stranger than he said, it's stranger than you people down there think it is. That we incarnate and reincarnate for reasons that they're not fully known to you. It's stranger than you could possibly imagine. What the universe has in store for us, and what their plans are for us, and why they do this. Being human, we need to know why. We're inquiring minds need to know. This used to be the saying, the slogan of the National Enquirer: inquiring minds need to know, and that's human to know that. But I guess at some point, we got to realize there's some things that we're not meant to know.
Yeah, and I kind of, when I first started getting into this, I was out to prove it. Right. I was out to prove that this is real. We're experiencing real things. I wanted to get evidence. I wanted to get street names. I wanted to get addresses. I wanted to get verifiable details. But the more and more I've moved through this whole journey of spiritual hypnosis, I have moved away from trying to prove it and just tell people, like I always say, it's still just a real experience, right? You need to experience that and heal whatever traumas that either are stemming from this past life or that you think are stemming from a past life.
Indeed, yeah. People, who say, I can't believe that we've lived before. And you find it hard to believe and to accept that you've lived before. Isn't it just as strange to think that you're limited to one birth and one death? Yeah, why? Why should we be limited to one birth and one death? Why is it so strange to think that we might have lived before and we will live again? How many people live in the same house their entire life? They move from house to house. The house is something that we live in. Our body is something that our souls live in for a finite amount of time.
Right. It's like it sounds weird to talk about it like this, but it's almost like a shell.
The shell. Exactly.
Yeah. So, it's really interesting to talk to you because you've trained quite a few hypnotherapists as well.
Yeah, I have indeed. Yeah. And, and as I train them, I also put them through. I pick people and I demonstrate on them. And we've had some interesting things. Oh, like the fair. So here's one for you. Here's a fellow who had he wanted to be a motivational speaker. That was his dream. One slight problem. He had a fear of speaking in public. Right? He had stage fright, severe stage fright. Well, that's not going to work for a motivational speaker. So, when demonstrating past life therapy specifically, I took him back to the lifetime that was responsible for his phobia, his stage fright. And he saw himself, he experienced a lifetime in ancient Rome. And he was an announcer for the Colosseum. And what the announcer did in the Colosseum was walk out into the middle of the field right before, lions started eating Christians and gladiators started dismembering each other. He would get out there and he would read the events of the day, just coming up, the lions eating the Christians, the gladiators killing each other. And that was his job. Well, one day, and he used to read it from a scroll. Some of his friends played a joke on him and gave him the blank scroll. And he walked out there in the middle of the Colosseum. There's 50,000 people out there including the emperor. And he opened it up and there was nothing on it. And he froze. He absolutely froze. I mean, I would freeze too. You don't know if the emperor's going to give him the thumbs down. So that was, in his mind, the reason for his. And he went on to become one of the top motivational speakers of the Hispanic market.
That's awesome. I love hearing stories like that. And it just goes to show how powerful this stuff can be, working through these things. Like one story that I had is I had a woman who like when I was trying to take her into the hypnosis, she felt like she had a problem with like control. She always had to be in control of the situation. And when she wasn't in control, she would get really, really bad anxiety. Right. She couldn't control every little detail of her life, basically. And so I took her through this session, and my favorite method to use is the hallway of mirrors. I don't know if you're familiar. She got to the hallway and she couldn't move. And there was like a doorway at the end of the hallway that she felt she was supposed to go through, but she couldn't move. So the whole session was just me getting her to take one little baby step after the other one, get into that door. And then she opens the door and she's like, I said, don't try to tell me what you think is in there. Don't try to make something up. Because the whole time she was like, let me imagine something that's here. Let me make something up. And I was like, just open the door and tell me your first impressions. She opens the door and she's like, oh, it's just nothing but a sky. I better imagine a floor. And I was like, no. I was like, no. Don't imagine the floor. What I need you to do is gather your courage and just step into the sky. That's what I need you to do. I need you to step through this door and step into the sky. And what it did was it helped her to realize that it's okay to surrender that control, you see, because she couldn't create that floor to walk into that sky. And so that was a really powerful realization for her, but for me mostly too.
Oh, yeah. That's interesting. Sometimes you will have that where people don't see anything and it's a blank. Then you can use their imagination. You can use the imagination to prime the pump. I grew up on a farm on Long Island. We had, along with an airport, we had a farm. And we had water pumps on the farm. And in the old days, to get the water to come up, you would pour a pitcher of priming water down the pump, and then you can start pumping and the water comes up. Well, where a person starts drawing a blank, what I do is I will have them imagine something that would be apropos to where I have them. Let's say I'm taking them to a marketplace. And well, if they don't get a clear, independent vision of the marketplace, they can imagine a marketplace from a book, from a movie. Maybe they saw the movie Casablanca with Humphrey Bogart, and there's a marketplace in Casablanca. Imagine that, and then I tell them you'll be surprised how often that imagined marketplace will morph into something that is appropriate for where you are. So sometimes the imagination can be used if it's done correctly.
So let me ask you this question now. So have you ever heard of the condition of aphantasia or aphantasia?
Yeah, right. But
have you ever had any clients with that?
No, where they can't talk, right? Yeah.
It's where they can't visualize anything in their head.
Visualize, yeah. Okay. When that happens, before it happens, you have to, I tell the person, some people experience visually, other people experience auditorily. In other words, they will hear, and other people will experience kinesthetically, which is feeling in an emotional or a tactile sense. Well, I tell them that not everybody can visualize. Most people can to some extent, but not everybody can visualize greatly, and I don't expect them to necessarily have a picture clear postcard imagery of what they're seeing, what's there. So, but I tell them that they can rely on the other senses too. You can hear the experience. You can sense it. There can be a knowing, which would be more or less kinesthetic. Right.
Yeah, I actually have aphantasia, and that's kind of what happens to me is I just kind of say things that I feel are right, but if I say something else than what I feel like I should say, I feel like it would be wrong. So, yeah, I just wanted to get your take on that. So, my next question for you is this. So, there's kind of like an awakening almost. I don't know if that's the right word, but there's an explosion of people who are interested in doing this, in doing past life regressions. And my question is, in your professional opinion as a trainer of hypnotherapists and your background having doctorate degrees in this, do you think that people should pursue training before just diving into this, kind of like you and I did?
Yeah, I strongly suggest that. And this is why. That's for the same reason that I tell people I don't necessarily advocate DIY past life regression. In other words, do it yourself. Because for a number of different reasons. But the principal reason is because of the danger of abreaction. And abreaction is defined as an abnormal reaction. An abnormal reaction to the experience, abnormal reaction to hypnosis. The last thing you want to have doing is having someone have the screaming minions. Not good. Not a good idea. You end up opening Pandora's box. And you can do more harm than good. So what the value to training, one of the principal values is not just to learn how to do it, but also to build in appropriate safeguards.
Right. Right.
That is very important. There is no reason why a past life regression has to be traumatic. It can be dramatic without being traumatic.
Right. And I've said this a few times, and I've gotten into some arguments with some hypnotherapists about this, about how I think that if you don't know the appropriate way to make people feel protected, because these things can be very traumatic. My sister, before I knew what I was doing, and I actually really regret this because I didn't know what I was doing. And I took her into a past life where she relived World War II being stabbed in the chest with a bayonet. And that was horrible. And she never wants to do it again. I don't blame her. It's a real, I wouldn't really go as far as necessarily to call it a danger, but it's a risk, and some people have argued with me like, oh, you don't need training. You just have to have good intentions. But good intentions can only get you so far. What you're doing is you're messing with people's heads and you're messing with people's emotions.
The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah, there you go.
But I'll give you an example. Okay, this is one lady I worked with last week. I took her back to a lifetime. I says, okay, where are you? And she described the place. I said, you're male or female? She says, I'm male. About how old are you? She says, I'm 9 years old. What do you do? I described the scene. She's clinging to her mother. She says, why are you clinging to your mother? Because they're coming to take me away. And turned out she was in Nazi Germany during the war, and her neighbors suspected that the family was Jewish. The father was not Jewish, and the mother was Jewish. And the neighbors somehow learned this, and they turned them in. And the SS or whatever came and took them away, threw them in the gas chamber, and they were gassed. They died in the gas chamber. So I didn't want her experiencing that. I could have her experience it and remove the emotion and look upon it clinically and dispassionately, with no pain, no anxiety. That's one way to do it. But another way to do it is just for them to know that it happened, and they do not have to experience the pain.
Right.
And that comes with experience, but it comes with training.
Training is the fast track to it. Like, I really wish I did something. I think I had her watch the experience from a third person perspective instead of having to live it.
Yeah, you're watching it on a TV screen or a movie. Absolutely.
Yeah, it still traumatized her though, and I really regret that. But that's a real risk too. If people don't know what they're doing, they can really mess people up and traumatize them. And that's why I always recommend it, from a client perspective, you need to find someone who kind of knows what they're doing, There
are many different safeguards that you can build into a session, and that's what they need.
Right. Yeah, and you have the background, you have the qualifications, and so I'm glad that you agree with me, because there's some people out there that were just like, yeah, you don't need any training, you don't need to do any of that stuff, when I strongly disagree. And not only that, but like the biggest argument against past life regression is the linchpin of you're creating delusions, right? If you look at it from a strictly materialistic standpoint, there's some people that say that when you're doing these things, you're creating delusions in people's heads. And that's definitely a risk. So what's your take on that particular?
I'm not creating anything. They're the ones who are creating it. They're the ones who are telling me. I'm not a psychic. I don't do past life readings. A psychic does a reading on someone and says, this is what you are. I take them back and I allow them to experience what they're meant to experience, what they want to experience. I just guide them. I'm a tour guide is what I am. Basically, right. Is what I am. I'm a tour guide. I take them back there, and then they can see what they want to see, and I can lead them through that experience. And is it how do we know it's delusion? How do we know that this did not in effect happen, and this is a lifetime? And I believe that your subconscious mind, or you want to call it the superconscious mind, or your higher self, or the universe, whatever you want to call it. They make these things known to you for a reason. They're really only going to give you things that you can handle. It may be difficult at times, but they're only going to give you things that they can handle. And that's like saying, well, wait a second, you shouldn't go to the movies. That's total illusion and delusion.
Yeah, absence of proof is not necessarily proof of absence.
Proof of absence, exactly. Carl Sagan. Actually, someone said that before, but he used to use that quote. Yeah, absence of proof is not the proof of absence.
Yeah, and that wraps it up really nicely. That thought, because I've been trying to get this across. I'm just glad I have like the expert of hypnosis here to back me up on this. So whoever tried to argue with me, you know who you are.
And you can also as another quote, you can quote Hamlet, who I believe in the play Hamlet. I believe it was in Hamlet, where Shakespeare wrote, "There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than I dreamt of in your philosophy." So that's another thing.
Yeah, this whole entire thing, it just makes me think how much we don't actually know. You know?
Yeah. No, we don't know what we don't know. That's it. We don't.
Yeah, and there's some people that I don't know how you'll feel about this, but I'll tell you about this research project that I'm actually running right now. I've bleeped it out before, so I'll probably bleep it out again. Sorry, audience, not ready to share it. But I'm actually running a research project about, if that makes sense.
Sure. That's fascinating. It would occur to me, someone once said that all in nature is reincarnation. A tree lives, it dies, and it's born again as another tree. The parts of that form another tree. So it's all reincarnation. When you talk about opening neural pathways, I've often wondered, what is it about children who can access, not all of them, but a lot of them spontaneously access past lives, but then they lose it. But then they lose it when they're 6 or 7. They don't remember it anymore. So I've wondered, is there an organ somewhere in our brain that acts as a receiver for this information, and then as we grow, we no longer need it, and it shuts down. It calcifies. Some people have posited that it's the pineal gland, and it calcifies, and the third eye. They also call it the third eye, and it doesn't allow through this particular information that we were privy to when we were younger. Very rare. More children have spontaneous past life memories than do adults. And maybe that's what, as I know, and for myself, when I was younger, I used to have deja vu experiences all the time. I very rarely have them anymore. I'd always have experiences like knowing during a conversation what that person was going to say. I know they've said it before. I know I've been here before, but that seems to have gone away.
And that brings up a really interesting concept or question. It's the question of local consciousness versus non-local consciousness. So, in other words, does your consciousness solely reside in your brain, or does the source of your consciousness lie outside your brain, and your brain acts as kind of like a receiver?
And a receptacle. The work has been done on that at the University of Arizona. I forget the fellow's name who did that. But he sees consciousness as residing in something in the brain called the microtubules. And that holds your consciousness. And that when you die, these microtubules disperse out there to the universe. And then they coalesce again and come into another brain. And those microtubules. So begs the question, during a near-death experience, what happens? Maybe those microtubules leave the body, and then somewhere someone's directing it and saying, no, it's not time. You got to get back in there. Then they get back into the consciousness goes back to the microtubules. But there's more work that was been done at the University of Arizona on that.
Yeah, there's a few universities that have looked into things like this. This is a huge conversation for
Mm.
people who aren't familiar with it. Like, what is consciousness and where does it come from? There's the traditional materialist mindset that your consciousness just resides in your brain, and once we die, it just stops. And the concept behind that is that you can get brain damage, and when you get brain damage, your personality can change. So that means your consciousness resides in your brain. But then you have to take into account things like remote viewing. You have to take into account like the ESP experiments that have been done, and things like that, where it's been verified. There's even, I don't remember which university did it, but they did a study that proves that people can actually sense or tell when you're staring at them, even if it's through a camera. Like, they can sense that, and it's highly accurate. So that really kind of throws that whole materialist argument into question. Is like, okay, if our consciousness is just inside our own head and it goes away after we die, why can all these other weird things that are proven happen?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, the research that's been done on NDEs, the near-death experience, where a person actually can see what's happening in the not only in the operating room, but in other rooms in the hospital. They died in a hospital,
Yep.
or they floated up and they saw that there was a sneaker on the roof of the hospital. And it came back. They brought this person back, and he says, "Yeah, there's a sneaker up in your roof." What do you mean? He said, "No, I was up there." And they went up. They found a sneaker. How would he know that?
Yeah, exactly. How? Where does that come from? I heard this experiment, not this experiment. This woman had an aneurysm that hadn't burst, but it was a fairly large aneurysm, and they had to do an operation. And basically, what they had to do is they had to medically kill her and chill her body down to really, really cold. I think it was like 50 degrees or something. And I'll try to link this in the description for anyone listening to this so you can read what happened. But they had to monitor her brainwave activity because they needed to make sure that she wasn't going to get brain damage, because they had to drain the blood out of her brain very slowly to get this aneurysm to shrink. You see, so they taped her eyes shut to make sure that she wouldn't get like blinded from the light. And then they had these clicks going into her ears through headphones to monitor her brain waves, because if you send the clicks, then your brain would have an electrical frequency or something like that, and they could monitor that. So they have the documentation showing that, yes, she was actually clinically dead. I think it was for something like 53 minutes. She had no brainwave activity, and they have the records to show that, no, we were sending these clicks into her ears. There was no brain activity. And she floated up, and she described the tools that the doctor used to operate on her. She described the music. She said they were playing Stairway to Heaven, and she thought that was quite disrespectful because she was dead. And then she went on to have this incredible experience. And the whole argument of near-death experience against it is that it's your brain trying to comfort you as you're dying. Right. It's your brain is trying to comfort you through this process of dying. And so it's a hallucination. But the problem is she had no brain activity. And that's probably the single best documented case of an NDE that has proof to show, like, wait, no, there was no brainwave activity there.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah. An induced NDE is basically what it is.
Yeah. And it shocked the doctor, too. He was quite shaken up about it as well, because this happened quite a while ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are all really interesting questions.
Well, we haven't covered it all. Let me put it that way. But we could go on and on and on. This might be maybe the subject of another show. But we've covered a lot of the salient features, and I think a lot of the questions that are in people's minds.
Yeah, and so do you want to talk about your website and your Facebook page, and just mention your book one more time so that people can
the Facebook page group, not a page, not a page, is a group. Your journey was never meant to end, and we do. It's not as evidence as rigorous as some one of the other groups which I will mention, but it does allow more esoteric content. But we do try to keep it whenever possible evidence based. And then the book is Your Journey Was Never Meant to End, a compelling case for reincarnation. So basically the group and the book share the same name. And the website is drkaloski.com. That's simple. My name, doctor is spelled out DOCTOR. Kaloski is spelled KALOSKI.com. And they'll get a good grounding in past life regression.
That's wonderful. And the question I always ask, the $1 million question, is, do you have a message that you'd like to leave for my listeners?
Yes. Always remember and never forget. Live each and every day as if it were your last. Because someday you'll be right.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's wonderful. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on to my show, Bruce.
Oh, it's my pleasure. You enjoyed it immensely.
That's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank Dr. Kaloski for coming onto the show, and I would also like to thank you for tuning in. Like I said before, head on over to my Facebook or my Twitter to get some show updates and some additional content. Just so everybody knows, my Christmas episode is going to come out on Christmas Eve. So that means it's going to be a couple days early so that everybody has a chance to listen to it. It's going to be called A Pagan Christmas. So look forward to that on Christmas Eve. I'm going to put all the updates on my Facebook and my Twitter, so head on over there. If you like the show, I'd appreciate you subscribing in your podcast player and sharing the show around with anyone you think might be interested, or even someone who you think would be interested in coming onto the show. If you're interested in coming onto the podcast and talking with me about your experiences, send me an email. My email is theregressionsession@gmail.com, and I would love to have you on the show.